Hey guys, this is Andre here. I know today is Sunday and it's beautiful weather outside. Here in Brno it's actually 16 degrees and sunny weather, but it's not yet time for a walk. Now it's time to figure out the Netlify functions and get the website up and running. So if you've seen my two previous episodes or Twitches about the wedding sites, you know that I do have a wedding site. Let me actually bring that up here. That's built on Gatsby. And not Gatsby, sorry, GridSum. On Gatsby, that's a different site. And right now what I'm trying to do is that there is a little form here at the bottom of the page. So every attendee gets their own version of the page. And at the end of this page, there is a form here that will need to be dynamic. So I need to get the data from the attendees back to a headless CMS that I'm using. That's actually content here. And I'm using Netlify functions to do the data exchange. So first of all, I need to get the data from the headless CMS into this page because the data for forms are not static, so I cannot really use the static site for the dynamic type of data. And I need to implement two ways of communication. One is from the headless CMS here into this site in terms of this component. And then whenever someone clicks on the items on the form, I need to do another function that will actually take the data back into the headless CMS. So that's what I'll be doing today. That's what I couldn't implement the last time because I had to cut the Twitch short. So this is the page on GridSum. You see that there is an ID of the attendee. So every attendee in the headless CMS has their own ID, which is this thing. And I already have the Netlify function ready for that. So this actually gets the data from the headless CMS based on the ID of the attendee. So this is just for the accommodation form. And the last time there were some issues with CORS because the CORS actually prevented my component in Vue.js to process the response. But I figured out a way, actually just a few minutes after I switched off the stream the last time, I figured out a way how to fix that. So let me actually make this thing bigger. So this is the delivery Netlify function in Visual Studio Code. You see that I'm getting all the processing is happening here. But what I was missing last time is on the response, there needs to be header, access control, allow origin, and star. Of course, this is going to be the ID of, or not ID, but the host of, or the domain where I'm going to be hosting the wedding site. But for now, for local, I just set it up as a star. So this will allow all requests from all domains. And obviously, on the other side of the website, so this is the GridSum implementation of the component. Here I'm actually fetching the URL with method get, and I think that the mode has to be set for CORS. So last time I did have a no CORS, but that didn't work well. That would just give me a different kind of response. So now when I'm using CORS, I'm getting the response right away. And in the console log, I can actually get the right data. So let's take a look. I think that when I refresh this page, I should see the response in console. So here I'm getting object, and the object has option not interested, how many to, and note nothing. So with this data, I can actually render the component. So let's go back into the GridSum implementation, and we're looking at, oh, this is a different one. This is the component. So here I'm going to be essentially defining a data for the component. So what I can do here is just provide here a function that will return an object of data. So in this case, it's going to be pretty much similar to what we have in the response. Let me just get rid of the ID here and uncomment this piece of code. So this code just renders the form, and we're looking at this section. So this is the accommodation object. Let's just leave it on for now. And I'm going to set it up here as a data object and render it with null. But what we can do at this point is when we get the response, so this is going to be accommodation object, and we can define this as the data set. So whenever I get the response, I'll change the data set, and when that happens, I will get the accommodation object here. So I'm actually gonna base this on, so this is actually a different thing. So this message should be displayed whenever there is an accommodation object and that the option that's selected is booked. Now let's take a look at the response. So in the response, there is option not interested. So this is exactly the code name that I'm looking for. So if there is accommodation and accommodation option dot option equals booked, then it's going to display this message. Otherwise, it's going to display the form. So even if accommodation is null, we still want to display the form. That's okay. Because the object does not have to exist. The first time when the attendee or invitee opens the page, the accommodation object could be null. So they're going to see this form. And this radio button, I can actually bind this to accommodation code name. And in this case, yeah, I think that in this case we can't use root the v model because this is a radio button and there are multiple of those. So if accommodation code name equals not interested, then it's going to be displayed here. And I'm going to use the same one for the rest. So here it's going to be hotel, and here it's going to be tent. Okay. And this is the status. So in this case, this is actually a status bar or little status icon that's displayed beneath the form. And currently this should be removed. So this will not show anything. This is just in case something is happening with the data. So in that case, this icon should be displayed. This one actually shows a spinner. This one indicates that the data of this form were correctly input. So in that case, I'm just going to show a check. And this actually indicates any errors that may happen during the save of those data. So in the case when I already have accommodation option, so there is any kind of value here, I can display the check here. So I'm just going to change this. The class will be bound. So Vue.js will actually process this component, and it's going to be always FA check, but there's also going to be check for accommodation object, if that's null. And if it isn't null, and there is an option, so that's not an empty string. Yeah, this one. If that's the case, then we can say this is a visible. Otherwise, nothing's gonna happen here. So if accommodation is empty, that means this is the first time the visitor is looking at the page. We're not gonna display this, that's fine. So if that's not null and the option is not empty, in that case, it's visible. Otherwise, it's hidden, which is fine, I think. And let's check if this is actually gonna work. Or we can actually implement these things as well. So here in the input type text accommodation how many, we can actually bind this. So we will remove value and set this as a v model that actually ensures two-way binding from the component to the Vue.js data set. So this is going to be a v model accommodation dot how did I call that? How many? How many? So I can leave it as it is. And the last one is a text area here, which I'm gonna bind to accommodation dot node. I think it was node. In case there is no data at start, what I'm gonna need to do is just define the object here. So we're looking at option, which is gonna be empty string. We're looking at how many, which will be 0 as an initial value. And we're looking at node, which is going to be also empty. Okay, I think this is good. Now let's clear the console and see how the page looks like now. Okay, so the form is displayed. The number of persons is 2, which I think corresponds to this field. This is okay. But the option not interested is not indicated anywhere around here. So this is not working. Let's check why this is not working. So the option is not interested, and I think there is an issue with the code name here. So this is none, not interested, not interested. I think this is okay. Accommodation code name equals not interested. Maybe there's a typo or something. In those cases, what I usually do is just output the value somewhere and check what the error is. Okay, not interested. Option, that seems okay. Checked. Accommodation code name equals not interested. Okay, I think this should work. For some reason, this is still not checked. Let's check. Not interested. Okay, another check what I do in these cases is I just put it here at the end. I just put here the whole condition that I'm using. Of course, guys, if you see something that I'm not seeing, feel free to let me know in the chat window. Okay, this is true, so this should fulfill the condition. Accommodation.codename. Okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong with Vue.js, so let me do a quick Google search. So radio button checked. This statement is true, that's fine. So you want to bind the checked for the connection. I think that's exactly what I'm doing here. Yeah. Yeah, that should work. Accommodation. Let's fix this as well while we're at it. Oh, here is the problem. So I'm using code name here while its option is not a code name. Okay, let's see now. Okay, now it's checked correctly, so that's good. So I can remove the test output here. And you see the first part is actually successfully finished because we already get the right data. And the check button should be displayed here as well. So let's check that for a moment. So class accommodation is not null and accommodation option is not empty. Again, let's do a quick output here. That's true, so it should be displayed. FA check. Visible. Let's check that. So we're looking at those are the inputs here. Why is the status not displayed here at all. So I'm not seeing the whole status field there. Group and, okay, that should be the group, and here it is. Okay, div class status, and this should be visible. Why isn't it visible then? So it's 0, 0. So this is an issue with CSS, it seems. So the status has the right size, but the E elements don't. So let's fix that. Let's do a width 20 pixels, height to 20 pixels as well. Nope, still not working. Opacity is 1, so it should be displayed. Maybe it's hidden by some other element. No, still not there. Let's try to add some text here. Okay, that works. So for some reason we're not seeing the icon. Let's see if we can see some other icon here. No, we can't actually. If we set up the right size for this one and height as well, we're not seeing that as well. So why are we not seeing that? Opacity is 1, that's okay. Position is correctly set. Maybe it's something wrong with the fonts. Let me see if there are any other. I think this is also a font awesome icon. No, this is actually material icon, so it's something different. I'm not sure if I'm using anywhere else a font awesome icons here. Maybe it's a problem with the font awesome here. Let me try to reload the page. Let's try to display a different one. This should be visible, so it seems like there is a problem somewhere with font awesome, but I don't know why that is. Maybe I forgot to include the font awesome. Let me see the source code if we actually do have the font awesome icons there. Because what I usually do is I have a template for the site in a different folder, so sometimes I forget about including all the things that I need. So these are icons, but we're looking for font awesome, and I'm not seeing that here. So that could be the issue. Let me just copy that over from the template. So this is the template that I'm using. Here is Vue.js, and here are material icons, and there are font awesome icons. So let me just copy that to this file. So I think this is in main.js. So this is the reset. These are the material icons, and there are no font awesome icons. So that's the issue here. All right, I'm just gonna copy that over. So in that case, I'm just gonna need another section for head link. And we're looking at style sheet. The ref is this thing. Integrity. I'm just copying over the things from the standard meta tag. This is a way how GridSum handles links in the header. Very easy and very simple to use. And we'll see if that fixes the issue. Nice, so we now get the check mark here. All right, so this is correct. This is how it should be. And now we need to implement the other way around. So when someone changes the selection, I'm gonna have to display the spinning icon and then save the data in the headless CMS. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna need another function, and I'm gonna need some function here in GridSum as well to actually react to these changes. Yeah. So let's start with GridSum. I'm gonna go back into the component, and here on every button here, on all the radio buttons, this is one way how we can do it. So add here on-click method that would be called whenever someone clicks on one of these radio buttons. The other option would be to actually bind it to a model, and I think we could also do that as a whole. So let me see. Vue.js radio button vModel. Let's see if that actually works, if Vue is intelligent enough to actually check the right radio button if it's bound to a model. Let's check this, or actually this one might be better. So vModel will ignore the initial checked, that's fine. And we can use the vModel to do it on form input and select elements. So it seems it could work. So in that case, it makes our job much easier. So in that case, we don't need the checked here. We just need to do a vModel. And that would be accommodation.option. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I've never tried it, so we'll see in a moment. But that, according to the documentation, that should automatically update the checked status. So we'll see if that's true. In that case, obviously the values need to match whatever's coming from the service. So I'm gonna have to change this. I think not interested is okay, but here it should be hotel, and here it should be just tent. So this should correspond to the code names that I have in the headless CMS. So let's see if this actually works. It seems it does. It still keeps the radio button checked. The way how I usually test this, if this works, is just put here accommodation. So this displays the whole accommodation object. And whenever we change something, we should all automatically get a different option selected here. So you see this actually works. So it shows me a changed option. And the great thing about this is that whenever you need to change something in the headless CMS, you need to invoke a function that would actually do that. You don't have to bind to every single element that is capable of changing the dataset, but you can do a watch method. So we're right here. We can do a watch here. Can do after methods, and the watch will actually watch for the data changes. So let's go ahead here and check. Where do we have that? So this is computed and this is watch. So the way how it works is that there is an object watch, and the method that is supposed to watch a specific data field has to be named by the data field. So in my case, it's going to be called accommodation, because my data set is accommodation, right? So accommodation, and that's going to be a function with a value. And I think we also get the old value if you want. I think it's mentioned somewhere over here. So you can get the new value, and you can get also the old value. I'm not sure. Yeah, here we go. So this is the new question and old question, right? So this is the new value and an old value in case you need it for some reason. I'm just checking the new value, so I'm fine with this. I don't even need that because I can reach the data property directly. But this is just a simpler way of doing things. You have the data as a local parameter, so it's easier, or much clearer to use, maybe is a better word for that. So in this case, I'm just gonna first log the change. So we can see that this really works whenever the dataset changes. So if we go back here and open console, I'm just gonna try to put it side by side. So now this still renders the object. Let me actually remove that. So we keep our console clean. Okay. And now when I change something, I should get the console log. Now I don't see this happening. So probably the method is not getting triggered. Let me see what could be the issue here. So accommodation is here. Let's see the documentation if I forgot about something. Now this should work as far as I can see. But maybe the problem is that I'm updating component or data field that's below the main object, but that should be invoked anyway. Yeah, I think this is correct. Watch, it's right beneath data, so maybe the position is an issue, but I don't see any constraints about this. Yeah, let's check again what's happening here. So we do have to watch here. Let me actually move that below data so that we have it the same as in the example. So data and watch is in blue, that's fine. And accommodation, that's the data field function that should log the stuff into console. I think this is correct. Let's try to do it again. Okay, still not getting invoked. Let's ask Google again. Watch is not triggering. So view cannot add property addition or deletion. Property must be present in the data object in order for view to convert it and make reactive. Okay, that makes sense. So the problem is that I'm changing the underlying fields and not the object itself. So what we can do in this case is just do it this way. How many will be 0, and we're looking for node is nothing. So we're going to remove the accommodation object, and we're just going to store the properties themselves. Now we have to change everything else as well. So the models here. And we don't have to check the accommodation object anymore, so we can just check the properties. So this is okay, and in this case we can check just option. And this is never going to be null because I'm just initializing that, so now we can remove this. Let's just keep here the option so we know that the dataset is actually changing. And I think we are ready. Oh, there was one more thing. There is one bracket missing. And I think we're good. In this case, the name is gonna be option. Not that it will matter. The only thing that matters is the V model, but I just like to keep these two in sync. And we should be fine. Let me check the status. The status is here. Okay, that's all right. Now we should be able to do that. And in this case, this function, the watch function, is not going to be called accommodation, but it's going to be called option. And we should get the right values here. So let's try to run that again. Okay, I'm going to clear this and refresh the page. We're not getting any errors, that's good. And this is also not done, but that's because here this accommodation does not exist, right? So I'm gonna have to do this in a different way. So this option is gonna be accommodation object option. This how many will be accommodation object how many. And this node will be accommodation object node. Now we should also get this checked. So you see this is checked now. and not interested is the actual option at this point. Now, when I change this, you see that I'm getting the different data in the console log. So the model is working, the watch property is also working. So at this point, we can do some dynamic magic here on this static side. Now, when this happens, when this option gets triggered, we can say, or what I like to do is just put here another function. There is a send data function, but let's call this function something that actually tells the front end that something's happening with the data. So let's say option loading or something like that. And this could also be a data property or option being processed. That's, I think, maybe better. And I'm going to initialize that to false because at this point nothing's really happening. The reason for that is that we still have here the status field. And when something's happening with the option radio button, there should be a spinner here that lets the users know something's happening, right? So what I can do is I'm going to bind this class as well, and just going to change a bit here. And this is going to be visible only in case that option is being processed. In that case, it's going to be visible. In other cases, it's going to be hidden. And the same thing will happen for the last status field here. And that's going to be displayed when there is an error. Option error, let's say. I'm not really good at naming properties, but I'm sure you get the idea. So if there is an error, this is going to be visible. Otherwise, not. I think this is okay. You can also do this with a vif. So if you don't prefer classes here, you could also put here vif option error, then it's going to be displayed this way. Yeah, it might be better way to actually achieve this. Maybe I'm just going to refactor this later, but right now I'm just going to base that on classes. And for that, I'm going to also need a different property here, option error, which is false currently. Now, whenever the data set changes here in watch, what we can do is set the option being processed to true, do some processing here, and then option being processed is going to be false, and then it's going to be success or error. So I can add here another option success. And just put here option success is true. In case everything goes right, in other case, this is going to be false, and there's going to be an error here. And here in the process data, I'm just going to take the data, and using fetch API, I'm just going to send the data into the serverless function that will process them. So this is not going to probably display anything because it's so fast. It's going to jump into the option success true right away. But what I wanted to also do is not base this on an option, but put here option success. And if this is false, because this is by default is false, then I'm just going to put here whenever I get a response and I need to process that, I'm just going to define here option success to true. Because the accommodation object is already filled, so I can also base this on the value of option. So if this option is not empty, because there could be an empty, there could be a case when this is empty. So if that's not empty, this is going to be true. Now let's see if that works. and it seems it does. It still is enabled. Now when I change this, it's so fast that I don't even see it. Yeah, but it's gonna work. If we take a look at the console, we get a lot of errors here. Option being processed is not defined. That's because this is defined here. Option being processed is false. Let me actually clear this. Maybe it's an older error and refresh the page. Error in callback for watcher option. Option being processed is not defined. Option being processed, but this is defined here. Option being processed. So why doesn't he like this? Maybe I need to reference this. Okay, this is undefined, so maybe this will work. Yeah, I think we need this here. Let's see if he's gonna stop complaining now. Just gonna refresh the page and clear the console for that. Yeah, so in methods, I need to use this keyword in order for this all to work. But you see now this is working well. So this is the set, and this also works well. All right, now let's switch back here to the Netlify function. In this section, we're actually looking to get the ID of the invitee. So this is the other way around, from the static side back into the headless CMS. And in order for that, I'm not gonna need the delivery API, but I'm gonna need a content management API. So let's see. There is an overview of all the APIs, and we're looking for management API. And we are looking for an SDK. There is no SDK here, okay? But there is one. This one. I think I already installed it last time. Let's see if this is here. Yeah, so there's a content management here. So we should have that available. So let's say this is content management. Content management. And I'm just looking for some kind of tutorial how that works. So we're gonna need to define the client first. So const client equals new management client, the project ID. I think I do have that in the end file. Let me see. So there's the content project ID and there's a content management key. So this is what I'm looking for. Content project ID, and the API key is content CM key. I can remove these comments. So otherwise, if you don't have them there yet, what you can do is go to the app. And just go into project settings, API keys, and you're gonna find the management API key here. You're gonna have to switch that to active in order for this to work. And just put it here. And then when we do have this here, we're gonna need to get the ID of the invitee. So that's something that has to come. That has to come from the context. I think we did the same thing here in delivery. So this is the ID. Let's call that only ID then. So from query string parameters, we're gonna need the code name of type that we want to change. But let's put a pin in that. First of all, I just want to get the data. So we're looking for accommodation option. that should come in probably in the body of the request. So we're looking probably at context. I'm not sure about that now, but let's comment this out first, and let's see what we actually have in the context. And we'll see. I'm just going to start Postman to simulate a request from the front end. And when we have that, we're going to need a bit of a help here. So we already have a content item there, so we're going to need to get a content item. And I think we're going to need a better documentation than this one. Okay, we're looking at JavaScript. And we're looking at getting content. So we'll get content, but using the management API. So this is the delivery. We're looking at content management. Let me see. Let's try the API reference. Management API 2. And we're looking at content items. And we do have internal ID. So we're looking at base URL /items /content item ID. I'm just gonna make this bigger so that we can see that properly. And we don't want to add a content item, we're gonna retrieve a content item. So this is what we're looking for. So this is the management client, and we wanna try it this way. So we don't want to use observables, we want to use async. But that should probably work as well here. So this is the item of the invitee. So we're getting content item by item ID, and the item ID is coming from the request. And the little keyword await here should do the trick. And we're gonna log that here. And return 200, that's fine. This is a test case, so we should be good by that. And let me figure out this part. So we're looking at functions /action. And ID is gonna stay the same, so I'm still using with the same invitee, that's my click encode. And in the body, I'm gonna send here some data. What we're looking at is probably sending the option, let's say none, how many would be 2, and node could be empty for now. And we're actually sending that as a JSON, so this is fine. It's already configured that way. And we're gonna do a post request. So let's see if that's gonna work. I'm just gonna try to switch here to action. Okay, management client is not defined, so I do have some issues here. I just have it as a client. Oh, this management client is not defined. That's because this is content management, I think. Let's see. Here we're importing management client, so obviously these two have to match. So I'm just gonna make this content management. And now the request should go through and should show me, okay. Content project ID is not defined. Okay, that's true, because this should be, I think it's env.process. It's not just like that. Let me see. Yeah, we need to do it this way. So content project ID and content CM key. So now this should be okay. Still, there is another constructor here. So I just probably did wrong copy pasting. But this should work. Management client, this is an object here. This should work. Project ID API key, that's fine. So what's the error again? I think it was here. Content management is not a constructor. Okay. Let's check the documentation once more. Now this should work as far as I can see here. Let's switch to this notation then. Management client. This is going to be content project ID. This is going to be content CM key. Okay, I'm just going to run the functions again. Okay. Okay, management client is not a constructor. Still the same issue. Okay. Where is the documentation? Here it is. So import from Kentaco/content dash management. Dash management. So we're doing require, while here is just import. Let's try to change it this way. Don't think that should make a difference, but maybe I'm wrong. We cannot use import statement outside a module. Okay, so we're gonna have to do it this way. So this is not a constructor. Let's try to take a look at the SDK here, but I think here it's the same. New management client, so we're doing that the same way. Okay, let me try to run npm install just in case I got something wrong. So I think I do have that here, content management 0317. That's the current version. That should be fine. Okay, let's try it again and run the functions. Okay, still the same issue. Management client is not a constructor. I'm not sure what's going on here, but let's try to Google for that. This seems actually similar. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do it differently. So looking at action here. So this is the whole module. So we should be able to do something like content management and do new content management dot management client. I think this should work then. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, now we got an okay. And we should also see some valuable information here in the console. So client context, we got the item here, project ID, config, blah, blah, blah. But the client context is nothing here. That's the important thing. So we don't have the data there. So let's try to do the same with event. Just gonna refresh this page. Oh, but this does not actually have any data. I'm gonna have to call that through the postman. So send the request. This takes a bit too long. Let me try again. Okay, this is ready. So let's send the request again. Okay, now we got a response okay. And let's see if we got the data here. So this is the path, this is the method, there is a query string parameter. We got some headers here. And we got the body as well. That's what we're looking for. So let's see what's in the body. So we get the body in the event. And let's see what this is gonna do. Let me just run this again to avoid the wait. And send it again. We got okay. Now let's see. Oh, this is an object. That's very descriptive. But it seems that we got the object in JSON, so this should also be a normal JavaScript object. In that case, we're looking at item, let's say item option. We can check that. If this will output none, then we're fine. I don't know why this hangs. Whenever I try to send another request here, this seems to hang here. Undefined. Okay. So if this is undefined, then I don't know what kind of object we have there, but let's ask Google again. So Netlify function process JSON body. I think this should give me an answer. Let's see. So this is a body, hello world. And I think I'm looking for event.body. When the method is posted, the name will no longer be in the event's query string parameters. It'll be in the event body. Anchor it as query string. So it seems that the event body is the object that they are parsing here. But what I want is do the same with JSON. So there was query string parse again. Let's see. I think we're looking at this at json.parse. Even the body. Yeah, so here they're getting the data by json.parse. So this is, I think this is the same that I'm looking at. So let's try it. Here. So json.parse event body. And let's log the body. This is still running and reloading. Okay. Error during invocation, unexpected token O in JSON at position 1. Maybe it doesn't like that this is not in quotes. Let me fix that. Let's run this again, and I'm gonna try this request again. Unexpected token O in JSON position 1. The same error. Okay, let me see if I actually have the right headers set up here. Content type is application JSON. That's cool. That's okay. So what is wrong here? Let's ask Stack Overflow. That's usually the best bet when you don't know how to do something. So the JSON you posted looks fine. It's likely not a JString anymore, but already JavaScript object. Okay, that makes actually a lot of sense here. So it seems this is not true then. But if this is an object, then the problem is it's empty. But maybe that was because I didn't have the quotes in there. So let's try to do it again. I'm going to try to not parse it. Okay, let me fix the formatting here a bit. So I'm not going to parse it. I'm just going to use event.body as an object. And in that case, I should get the object here. But this is still undefined. But that's the item, I think. That's this part. Which is fine because this is not going to be there. But this is an object. Let's say if we do have body.option. Okay, this is undefined. So not sure what kind of object this is, but it's giving me undefined for the option, which is clearly wrong. So I'm still doing something wrong. It's not necessary to parse it because then it's just parsing the sharp bracket object. Let's try a different thing here. Let's see functions and examples here. Body, event body. It's the other way around. Event.body. That's not here. So they're all doing JSON parse. But they're already sending it that way. Maybe there's an issue in my JSON here. But this is a simple JSON object. I don't see any issue with that here. So if we take a look at how the data are getting back from the delivery, we're looking at the same JSON here. So this is still undefined. Let me see how we're actually sending the data from delivery. So what we're doing is we're sending the response with JSON.stringify. So the JSON.parse should be there, I think. Event.body. Okay, now we got the right object here. That's interesting. Maybe it was because I had some extra spaces there, but I think otherwise it was the same, wasn't it? So these are all the requests that I've done today. But to me that looks the same. Well, it works now, so hopefully it's gonna keep working when we do it from the front end. So you see we get the object here, and we also get the ID. So this is not gonna be a body, but this is gonna be option object, or accommodation object, sorry, not option. And what we want is get the item by its ID. When we do have the item, so we already have all these, we need the content management API to send the data to content. Now this is the this is the item of the invitee. So we're looking at a nested item of this one. So I'm actually close these things and get back to the API documentation. So what we want is the content item ID, or content item that's of type accommodation, that's below the content item that I just got here. So let's see what we get here. What we're looking for is to find out if there is an accommodation object below this item, and if there is, we're gonna need to get that one. So let's try to do the request again and see what we have there. So in the item, we got config, we got query service and other stuff, but we're looking for our elements. Query config. No, we don't need any of those. It's just a query though. So we don't need the query, we need the item. So what do we have here? What can we do? We can do that item. Let's see if this will actually show me the data. Just gonna run this again. Undefined, okay. So that item is undefined. So let's see if I can find an example how to do this with async, not with observables. So I'm just gonna go back to the GitHub page. So this is still observables. So let's try Google again. SDK confirmation, SDJS, await. Must include await, yes. So this is the delivery listing. We're looking at content management though. So it seems like there are no examples of that. Only at the delivery SDK. So let's take a look at how we're gonna do that at delivery. So we're awaiting client items, filters, and there's a get method. Not sure if something like that is here as well. Get action, get headers, get parameters. get URL. No. So what if we do toPromise and then await the promise? I think we could do that too. So I'm not sure we can do that, but let's see. JavaScript await promise. Can we do that? Async await. Yeah, let's see if we can do that. So let's see, toPromise, and we're gonna await that promise and wait for the item. Okay, let's try to send the request here, and we got the item here. Perfect. So the raw data of the item are here. We're looking at accommodation object. So just trying to see if we have that here. Code name, site implications, type, raw. Location. We do not have the accommodation here, which is strange because we do have some additional data here. Let's see if there is something in the API that will actually tell us how to give it information which fields we want to get. So retrieve a content item by item ID. So maybe we're looking at with data. Now this is actually update, so this is not the right thing. This only lists content items, so this is not what we want. So this is only metadata. If you want to retrieve content data, see how to retrieve language variants of a content item. So this is probably what we want. We want to get the language variant by item ID. So let's see if we can change that. So await client list language variants of item by item ID. I think this only lists them. Yeah. Retrieve language variant. Let's see, this is what we want. By item ID, by language ID. So we're looking at language IDs. But we can also use language code name, and we only have one language here. So we could probably use this code as a sample. So we'd await the client, and the item ID in my case is this ID. And we're looking at language code name, not language ID. And the language code name in my case would be, I think it's default, but let's check in the app. So in the app, we're checking for languages. Here in project settings, we're looking at localization and default language. And the default language has a code name default. So I'm just going to copy that over to my function. So we're looking at default code name. And we don't need to use the observable, but toPromise. And we're going to wait for that. So let's remove this part. And see if we do have the item there. So let's send the request again. And we got OK. So we finally got the right item. in the data, there are row elements, there are elements here, and we're looking for element with the name accommodation. So we'll probably want to iterate over the elements. So item for each, item elements. I think it's item elements. Yes. For each element, we want to check what the element is. So let's see. Send that again. For each it's undefined. Okay. Let Google help me with this. So for each in JavaScript, how do we do that? I think this is okay. Let's see this. Everyone dot for each element console log. I think this is exactly what I did. Yep, so what's wrong here? Type error cannot read property for each of undefined. Oh, this is undefined then. Okay. Let's see again where I made a mistake. So maybe I forgot about one item here. So this is the response. Debug, raw data. Oh, data. Data.elements. Okay. So item.data.elements for each. Okay, this is better. So this is element with codename undefined. That's the name of the content item. But we're looking for content item. So we're looking for accommodation, but I'm not seeing the code names here for some reason. So this is an email. I can see that from the data, but I'm not really seeing the code names here. Which is an issue because at that point I don't know which type each content item element is. No, it's probably gonna be this one. This is the last one, but I don't know that for sure. Now the other option could be to take a look at the content item using the delivery API and get the code name of the accommodation object. If that object exists, of course, it might be easier than handle the stuff with the content management API. So for that, we could actually do the same thing as last time, so that we can move on a bit from this. Because there it's easy for me to get the accommodation object and its code name. So we're looking for this part. And we're actually looking for invitee, and we're looking for accommodation object. We don't care about any of these. We only care about accommodation. And the system ID should be ID. So at this point, we get the invitee and invitee accommodation. Or let's just log all the invitees, and let's for now comment this out. And let's try to run this. Okay, content delivery is not defined. Yeah, that's true. So I'm going to define it here. Content delivery. And let's try it again. Still an issue here. ID is not defined. That is true because my ID is defined here. Okay, now we got the item. So we're looking for item number 1. And the same thing should happen here actually. So we're looking for items with ID the 0 index. And here I see the accommodation, and I can also check the linked item and system field. So we're looking at accommodation. So item.accommodation. So this is what we got. Accommodation, modular content, and we do have here the system content item system attributes. This is what we're looking for because the ID is going to be defined here. And with the ID of the actual content item, it's easy for me to go in and use that for the content management API. So let's take that. So this is the linked item element. And value is an array, so I'm gonna have to take first item of the array. And we're looking at the content item and system.id. So in the best case scenario, if the accommodation object exists, I'm gonna get the ID of that accommodation object directly. So we're ready and send. Okay, so this is the ID that we're looking for. The only thing that can happen is if the object is not there. In that case, the accommodation object would be 0. And for those reasons, we have to get prepared. So there are gonna be two options or two situations that can occur. So accommodation ID would be this ID, and that is only if invitee items is not null, if invitee items is more than 0, and invitee items 0, accommodation is not null. If there is the object, then it's safe to say that the accommodation ID will be present, because every object, if there is one, then every object will actually have an ID. Otherwise, the accommodation ID will be null. Okay, so that makes things easier. Now we got the ID of the accommodation object. What we can do then is, based on the existence of that, if the accommodation ID is not null, then we're going to do an update. Otherwise, we're going to create new. And that will be a new language variant of the original item. And now we have actually ID of both the invitee and of the accommodation if it exists. So we can perform these actions easily. So I'm just going to put the instantiation of the client, management client here. We're going to create these two. And let me put this here as well. So this is the accommodation object that we got in the request. And this we will definitely need here. But I'm just going to check the documentation to see if there is an easy way to actually update a variant. So there's an observed actually that might be interesting for us. So observed language variant. So add content to a language variant in an active language or update an existing language variant. So this is exactly what I need. So I'll probably don't even need to distinguish between the existing accommodation object and if it's empty. So we're looking at this part. It's going to be a lot of data, but I think we can streamline it a bit. So let's put this away for a moment and let's put this part here. So we're looking at observing language variant. The item ID, we don't really have that yet because we don't know if the accommodation object exists. So in that case, we still need to create the language, the content item. List language variants for specific content type. No, that's not what I want. Content items, that's what I want. Observed and content item. So update the existing content item or add a new one specified by its external ID. Now we don't have any external ID, so that's going to be a bit challenging. But what we can do actually, yeah. So let's do it. Let's do it in two ways. So we're going to add content item. I'm just thinking how we can do it as a model content of the invitee. So there are two things we need to do. We need to add the content item, that's the accommodation object. And the other thing is that we need to take that content item and assign it back to the invitee item. So let's see how we can do that. So first of all, let me remove this again, because this is probably a different thing that what we need. So if there is accommodation ID, so I'll do it the other way around. If there isn't, we're gonna have to create new. In that case, we can go ahead and create a content item. So it's going to be this piece of code. So client add content item with data. The name of the content item will be the name of the invitee. So let's first check here, not just the accommodation, but I think the accommodation is actually going to be fine because it will give me also the content item name, or better, the invitee name. That's going to be invitee items. The invitee items should never be null, actually. Only in case the invitee does not exist, but otherwise it should be all fine. And this will actually give me the content item name. So I'm just going to do a quick check here. If invitee items is null, the other way around. And, or this is not actually be, and this is going to be or invitee items length equals 0. In that case, I'm just going to return 404, just like with the previous example. So we're going to return 404. Invitee not found. Okay. In this case, we know that the invitee name is always going to be there because the system fields are always gathered automatically. So we should be fine here. And now when we're creating the new item, the name can be based on that. So it's going to be invitee name plus accommodation. Code name could be the invitee. You can do the same basically. So item 0.system.codename. So we're looking at invitee codename plus accommodation. We could do a little underscore here just to make sure it looks nice. The type codename directly corresponds to my content type. So let's check what that is. So accommodation, content type is accommodation. So I'm just going to copy that over. Oops, wrong window. Here we go. So accommodation. And here we actually define the fields, I think. So external ID, we don't have any. But let me see how we can add the data there. And I think this is only the content item itself. This is not the language variant. So I'm just gonna go ahead and create this. So external ID is not gonna be there. And we wanna do to promise. And we wanna await that and see what ID we're gonna get. So accommodation item. Oh, await, not async. Await this promise. And once we get that, I'm gonna check the response here. So in the response, if it's okay, I'm gonna get an ID. This is what I'm looking for, the ID. So let's see. Or we can do is we can just check if the response was okay. Let me see what other response we can get with error. Okay, so if accommodation item error code, I think this should work this way. We'll see. We'll see in a moment. If accommodation error code is not null, because otherwise, if the request is okay, we don't get any error code. So if that is null, then we're gonna have to handle the error somehow. Probably return something like request failed. So something like 400. And in the body, I'm just gonna return whatever I get here as a message. So this should not usually happen, so that's why I'm just returning the message I'm getting from the headless CMS. That should help me better understand what's going on. And if it is null, that means the content item was created, and at that point I need to create the language variant. So not retrieve, observed. Let's copy this and put it here. Okay. So we're probably not gonna need these things. We're gonna start with client observed language variant by item ID, and the item ID comes from the accommodation item. Accommodation item dot system dot ID. And we're looking at language ID default. Language code name we don't care about, but we will need to add these elements here. So first element is gonna be code name. So this is the code name of the item, I assume. So let's try to do that. This should come from the accommodation item, I think. Let's see what's the response here again. Yeah, we got the code name here. So we should be able to do that. Accommodation item dot code name. Yeah, it's directly in the response, so we should be fine there here. Or this is actually for elements. Sorry, that's wrong. This is an element, so we're looking at elements of the accommodation item. So the code name of this element, that's the multiple choice option, is option. And the value is, in this case, it's as well an array. And the code name is one of these. So that's actually what comes from the front end. You see that I don't need the unset anymore. Yeah. But we're looking at booked, interested in booking a room, sleep and tent, and not interested. Now you see that the code names do not really correspond to what we have on the front end. So I'm just gonna have to map this somehow. So the booked will never be available from the front end, so we don't have to worry about that. But these code names will have to be translated. So in here, we're actually looking at the attendees object, and I think we have that all the way down here somewhere, no? That's the thing that comes in the body in JSON form. So let me look for JSON parse somewhere. We're looking event. Here it is. So accommodation. We're looking at accommodation option. So if accommodation is null, or accommodation option is null, or accommodation how many is null. So this is just checking if the request is okay. Node is null. We're gonna return an error here. $400 is a better request. And let's say here that the request must provide valid accommodation object. Okay, so at this point we know that there's all these things are here. And what we can actually do here is do the mapping. So if accommodation dot option equals hotel, in that case, interested in booking a room is the right code name. Accommodation.option is gonna be interested in booking a room. Else, if accommodation option equals tent, we're looking at sleeping in a tent. And if the accommodation option is, I think that's none, and here it's not interested. Not interested. And in case it's none of these, then it's a wrong request. Again. Still, this might require some refactoring. I'm just doing that for the sake of speed this way. But this should actually work. Accommodation option should now contain the valid codename. And that actually makes everything much easier here because I'm just going to define here a codename option, and here I'm going to define accommodation.option, and it's a valid codename, so we should be good here. So that's the first element. We're fine with that. All the others will get easier. The next element is gonna be how many. So I'm gonna copy that, how many, and the value will come directly from the body. So accommodation how many, and the last part is gonna be the node, and the value is going to be accommodation node, and that's all. We can delete the rest. So with elements ends here, then we're going to do .toPromise. And that's all we need to do here. Obviously, we're gonna be interested in the result. So language length variant, and we're gonna wait for the result. So we're observing that and waiting for the language variant. And if the variant was added correctly, so let's check in the documentation what we actually expect as the result. Request samples, response samples. This is content item, so we're looking at language variants, observing them. So the response will be either 2 or 201, 200 or 201. And if there is an error, then we're gonna always get an error code here with an error message. So if lang variant error message, error code, sorry, is not null or is null. What did we do earlier with the first time? So if it's not null, okay, if it's not null, then there's gonna be an issue here. And we can return the message just like we did here. Okay, 400 body accommodation item message. Oh, this is actually going to be the lang variant. So this is going to be a different message. And otherwise, and this is the successful case, we're going to return 200, and in body, we're going to return OK. And that's all for the case when the item does not exist. If the item does exist, so the accommodation ID exists, in that case, what we want to do is just the observed. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing, including the result actually. So we're going to do the same, but we're not going to create the new item. But we're going to look for, so this we will need to get from the accommodation ID, actually this way. So I'm probably going to need to do some kind of refactoring because you see that the code is very similar for these two. And actually, the only thing that happens is if the accommodation ID is null, then I'm just going to create the accommodation ID here. So what I could do is just do the accommodation, set the accommodation ID here, which is going to be the accommodation item.system.id. And then just continue by inserting the language variant. Right, and I can save a lot of code here. So I could just remove this whole thing. Actually, the whole thing all the way down here. And once this all happens, I think that we are done. We have saved the data and we should be in sync. So let's see how many errors I'm gonna get. It's always you know, suspicious when something is working on the first try. So let's try to run the Netlify functions and we'll see if this is gonna give me any results. So this is working. Request must provide a valid accommodation object. Okay. So we ended here. Accommodation is either null, or there is no option, or there is no how many, or there is a node. I think this might be because the null is actually matched with an empty node. Let's see. I think this is matched as a null actually, so I can't really do that here, or I could do 3 quotes. So this how many shouldn't be null ever. Accommodation option should also never be null, and this should also never be null. So accommodation object, if that accommodation object is empty, I think that's also wrong. So we could do it this way, or this way actually. Okay, let's try it now. Request. So it's still not matching this condition. So this should be false. Accommodation option is also not null. How many is also not null? And accommodation node. So let's remove this condition then. If that's null, it's not really an issue because it's also going to be an empty string when it gets to the headless CMS. So let's try if this is gonna fix it. Nope, still getting there. So it might be it's somewhere else. Maybe it's here. The accommodation option is not one of these. So what do we have in the accommodation object? Not interested. So not interested is I think this part. I thought this was none, but I think maybe we changed that. Let me see what we actually have here in the option in the front end. So we have not interested, hotel, and tent. Not interested, hotel, and tent. So now this should work. Okay. Accommodation item is not defined. Okay, that's true. That is true, so, but why is that a problem? Because we do this thing here, where do we use the accommodation item? Here, okay, now this is again an error that I caused when I was refactoring this bit of code. So we're looking at accommodation ID, which actually is filled here. And here we should also use the accommodation ID. Now let's try to run it. Invocation failed. So why did this fail? Which variant? wonder if we can actually debug this. Let's try if this works. No, it doesn't seem so. So I've never tried to debug that because usually the functions are quite easy and small. But this one is a bit more advanced. But let me see what we can do. So if accommodation ID is no, let's see if here we get the accommodation ID. So I think we got the accommodation ID here. Response with status 500. No HTTP resource was found that matches the request. Status 404. Sorry, trying to change this item ID. Variance default. I think this URL is actually fine. Let's check the ID with the invitee. What did I change here? Oh yeah, save the change. I think I removed one of the fields. Now let's see. Michael's accommodation. Oh, we got another one here. I think it's this one. But this one seems to be created 4 days ago. Let's remove it then. So this item has ID 58 EAC, but that's invitee. We're looking for accommodation. Accommodation is A63B57. And if we compare that with what we get here in the URL, A63B57, so that's fine. So the elements are actually fine, I think. And we do have the right ID, so what's going on here? But clearly the problem starts here. So client observed language variant by item ID, which is accommodation ID. That's correct. By language ID default. Option, how many? I think this is correct. We also have all the values correct. So it seems we're getting issues with this URL. Let me see if I can actually do HTTP request on this. No HTTP resource was found that matches this request. So maybe it's because the item is currently published. Let me try that. Let me try to unpublish it. Let's see what we have here. So this is still the same error. Can read property system of undefined. Okay, that's a different error. So 3363, line 33, and that's because, yeah, he cannot get accommodation ID because I just unpublished the item, so that's correct. So I do have to have that published, otherwise I can't change it. Or I could, but I couldn't get the ID using the delivery API. So yeah, this usually takes a while before it's published. Okay, here we go. So function invocation failed because this was not found. Let's see in the documentation if the SDK is actually using the right URL. So we're looking at project ID, v2 projects. Let's compare that with what we have here. So we're looking at v2 projects, ABC, that's fine, /items, item identifier, that's correct, variance and default, that's fine. And the URL should be manage.content.ai. And we are looking at put, so let me actually try it here. So looking at put into this URL, so this should give me something like 500, but not 404. Because the resource is clearly there, should be there, because we have both items there and the variant. I'm just trying to add the variant. So it seems like this is an issue of the SDK or of the management API. Because as far as I can see, I'm doing everything right here. Yeah, that looks good to me. I do have the token there. So it should be authenticated. Method is right, the path is right. And it still gives me not found. Alright guys, I think I'm gonna have to ask the guys at Content what's wrong with this request. Because this does not seem like an issue with my code. Because it gives me 404. And tells me to read the documentation. So I'm just gonna try to figure this out. And I think that there's gonna be a fourth part to this video or to this Twitch, because this is almost the last part, right? When we get the data into Content, then it's gonna be nice and dynamic and all finished. But it seems this actually requires some input from the teams. So let me get that. I'm not gonna implement anything. I'll just wait for the response, see if I'm doing something wrong. That's also a possibility, or if there is some kind of issue on the API. And when I get the answer, I'll get back and I'll tweet some more about this topic. And hopefully in the next video I can finish it all and have the website finally ready for attendees. All right, so bear with me. There's gonna be another Twitch session soon, and I'll let you know on Twitter when that's gonna happen. All right, so keep following me, keep checking my posts, and I'll let you know when we're gonna finish this. Thanks for watching today, and see you soon.